Hello and welcome to Country Life, I'm Duncan Smith. Lovely to have you join us for our summer series, when we revisit some of the people and places we've been to over the past year. Later on, farm-based fashion designer puts wool to good use in Otago, and we meet a traditional healer who works with shearers all around the motu. But first, imagine your office is the side of a mountain, and one as revered as the great volcanic peak at the heart of the Taranaki region. It's just that for mountain ranger Tāne Houston, who you might bump into on one of the tracks, checking traps or passing on his knowledge to visiting school kids. He's part of the Taranaki Moonga project, which aims to bring the Moonga and the people who live around it back to health. Sally round is with Tāne, who always starts with a karakia.
Tēnā koe te maunga, tēnā koe tēnei ngāhere te wānui o tāne. Nei rā, te mihi ki tō o irua tawhito. Tēnei mātau, tēnei au, te reo. My name is Tāne Houston. Tāne Woodamū Houston. I'm really honoured to be a mountain ranger here on Mount Taranaki. So I'm based out of the south of Taranaki, living in Hāwera, but I'm a part of an organisation that looks after the entire maunga. Katahi anō te mihi ni ki a koe panatahi. I engage with the mountain as a living being, and I'm a part of an organisation, a whānau that's encouraging the world to see the mountain in the same light. He rongo whakairi hia tō wairua ki runga i a tātou kia tīna, ui e tāe ki e.
Tāne is tall and burly. He strides ahead of me up a slowly rising track. He wears trampers leggings, well-worn boots and a high-vis vest. Its pockets are bulging with all the things you might need for trapping and keeping safe in the bush. I'm curious about his name, the same as Tāne, god of the forest.
So at my time of birth, my grandmother christened me Tāne Mahuta. But my mother thought that name was a little bit too significant and probably too heavy a name to carry through the world, so I took the name of my grandfather, which is Tāne Houston. But my grandmother reminds me now of her foresight, I suppose, and that now working in the space in the ngahere and working deep within the forest of Tāne Mahuta, my grandmother's quick to remind me that when I was born, she named me Tāne Mahuta, yeah. But nah, I'm nothing like Tāne Mahuta. We're just humble people that get to work in this beautiful space, but I suppose I'll just share that funny story on behalf of my grandmother. It's all right.
Others are coming up the track behind us, and we move aside to let them pass. They're volcanologists. This is their office too.
Be safe. Yes.
Mount Taranaki is considered to be a sleeping, active volcano. The last major eruption was around the mid-1600s. It stands just over 2,500 metres high, one of the most symmetrical volcanic cones in the world. Like an island, the sea in which it sits, rich, fertile farmland. And that's what makes it somewhat easier to get rid of predators and pests and fulfill the project's mission of restoring the landscape.
Taranaki Mounga Project is one organisation that exists in a massive community of a whole heap of organisations that are doing their best to fulfil this purpose of restoring the well-being of our mountain, restoring the well-being of the forest, restoring the well-being of the waterways, restoring the well-being of all of the native wildlife, and restoring the well-being of the community's connection to the mountain and to the natural environment. That's who I work for. That is the mission that I'm a part of. So what that looks like from day-to-day operations all the way through to the wider purpose or the bigger picture, it starts often next to a Dock 200. So we've arrived here next to a trap here on the mountain. We have thousands of traps on the mountain and a lot of different types of traps. But today we're working with the Dock 200. It's about the size of a letterbox, and they're placed in 100-metre increments along every track that we have here on the mountain. This trap in particular targets rats and mustelids. So the mustelids are stoats, weasels and ferrets. I'm going to open this trap up here. So these traps on our public track, they're screwed tight just to ensure that the public don't try and have a tutu with the trap and end up getting caught inside of it. And as we can see, I promise I haven't staged this, but we've got a young Norwegian rat that's here caught in our Dock 200, quite a fresh kill. And this is quite a common sight for us here on the mountain, so every 3 weeks when we are baiting these Dock 200s, we definitely find rats and stoats often in all of our traps.
It's kind of satisfying, isn't it? But then it's also...
they're still out there. Yep, they're still out there. So yeah, it's a win when we are catching rats, but it's also, you're absolutely right, it's also a reminder that these pest and predators do exist out here. So when we catch heaps of stoats or heaps of rats, we celebrate having caught heaps of rats or heaps of stoats, but on that same note, we're definitely reminded that these threats to kiwis, these threats to whio, these threats to tōtowai still exist here on the mountain, so it just shows us we've got a lot of work to do. So these first 30 odd traps along this public track we have made available for the South Taranaki hiking group, a small group of really dedicated trappers. We allow them these traps here to engage with. And they sort of customise their traps in a pretty cool fashion. You can see here they've attached a bit of a wire brace to the top of the box that can hold a prune. And so they've decided for the moment that they'll use a prune as bait, which looks like it might have done a good job.
Ooh,
there's also a fake egg in there.
Oh yes.
And they've used some walnut in there as well. So they're...
lots of tasty tidbits there.
Yeah, they've been really creative with the baits that they're using in this 200, and it's obviously worked. And I've just now set the trap again, seeing that this bait here, this prune and this walnut are still quite fresh. There's no need to rebait, but I am carrying fresh rabbit on me for any of the traps that need to be rebaited with anything more fresh. But this is good to go as it is. So I'm going to close this back up. What we're going to do is we're going to just chuck this rat in the bush and let the insects have it.
Goodbye, rat.
Lock this box up, keep it safe, keep the public safe, and that is how we engage with the Dock 200. There are thousands of Dock 200s right across the mountain, and so every 3 weeks there are massive amounts of our community that are out here in the voluntary capacity and in the staff capacity alongside Department of Conservation, tending to these traps and doing our best to get rid of the rats, get rid of the stoats, get rid of the threat.
We talked about rats. I understand that goats have been eliminated. What would it have been like before when the goats were here?
Well, I suppose for the listeners, if I just describe this bush that we're in at the moment, you almost, to your left and right hand side of the track, can't see your feet. So what that means is that without goats here on the track, the undergrowth is thriving. So as far as we can look left, as far as we can look right, there is undergrowth everywhere, 10 centimetres, 30 centimetres, metre high undergrowth just surrounding the base of all of these larger trees. Years ago, when the goat was here, a lot of this low-lying undergrowth would not have existed, and you'd just see bare ground and exposed root. But here we're not seeing any exposed root, nor are we seeing any bare ground. The whole ground is just covered with beautiful native rako, native tree life.
Very lush, isn't it?
It's very lush, yeah. Super green, heaps of beautiful colours, loving the colour of the horopito there. The pepper plant, it has a lush red leaf, and it's reaching up alongside these beautiful rōreko and kamahi trees that are covered in a really lush moss as well. So
what a huge result to get rid of the goats.
It's massive, yeah. It has been absolutely mind-blowing to not have any browsers here on the mountain. I've had many discussions with rangers and with conservationists all over the country, and they are still in a position where the deers and the pigs and the goats are browsing through their forests, and so they exist in forests where the roots of the larger trees are exposed. Here on Taranaki, you You will absolutely get lost in the bush if you step out off track, and that's just due to this massive amount of undergrowth that exists. So it's beautiful, it's absolutely luscious, and it really does give you a glimpse of how wonderful New Zealand native forest can be if we look after it really well.
We know that the Maunga is kind of like an island, isn't it?
Yep.
So it's, dare I say it, a little bit easier to do the kind of work that you're doing?
Yep, yeah, it sure is, yeah.
What are the lessons learned for other projects around the country?
The project itself sort of saw the mountain as an island. We know that we have heaps of success trapping offshore islands, and we wanted to transfer that success to the mainlands, and it was decided that Taranaki Maunga project, or Taranaki Maunga, would be a great place to do that. How that benefits other projects is that we can have a concentration of all of the different tools and newly developed tools on the Maunga. We can test them, we can trial them, we can run experiments here on the mountain regarding different ways of getting rid of pests and predators. Once we find that any of those systems work well, we can then advocate for those systems to be introduced to other projects across the country.
Despite not being an island like here?
Yeah, it can do for sure, especially the satellite systems, so the traps that are connected to Bluetooth and satellite systems, those traps coming out of Zip technology, so they're an organisation in Wellington and working in Christchurch, they work across the country. Their system is here on the mountain, and as that system develops, regardless of bush out there that isn't like an island, those systems will be of huge benefit to other parts of Aotearoa that are looking to control pest and predator numbers for sure.
The Maunga project has been going 9 years, and it covers 34,000 hectares. It also includes the Puakai and Kaitaki ranges to the northwest of the mountain and the Motu Sugarloaf Islands.
So for us, over those 9 years of working with the community to bring the ecology, to bring Papatuanuku and Tāne Mahuta back to life, we've now arrived at a position where we can bring kiwi back. And so the amount of trapping that's taking place on the mountain, the amount of community engagement working with organisations such as Taranaki Kiwi Trust and Rotokare Scenic Reserve, as well as Te Ara Taiao and Department of Conservation. There's so many groups that we work with, and because we're working with such an awesome amount of community groups, we've really got a handle on the amount of pests and predators that are here on the mountain, and because of that we're in a position now to engage in massive amounts of kiwi being returned to the mountain.
But there have been some losses, haven't there?
There have been some losses, yes. So naturally we're going to lose kiwi every now and then. There are still pests on the mountain. There are still predators on the mountain. Last year, out of about 60 kiwi moved to the mountain, we lost 4, 3 to predator and 1 to misadventure. So naturally we are going to lose birds, but we aim to keep that number as low as possible. Another thing is that through those losses we've been able to really learn where the holes in our systems are so that we can absolutely focus on...
And where are they, those holes?
Those holes exist down on the boundary, and so it's all about reinvasion. The mountain is covered in traps, and so now we're working really closely with TRC and our local farming community to ensure that the trapping that's happening on the farm is awesome as well, and we've been doing some really good work this year to support the trapping that's happening on the farms, and that's a way that we've been sure to try and cover that gap, which is reinvasion to the mountain, and we're doing really well, and the community's working together really well to do it.
And apart from the traps, you also have other tools, don't you? Cameras, for instance.
Yes, cameras. We also have satellite equipment that's attached to our traps, so we have traps that communicate to our phones and tell us exactly what's going on the mountain. Cameras will highlight any density of predator, so if our cameras are picking up ferrets in any location consistently, we know that that location needs a lot more work, and so we just get straight in there and be sure that that area is taken care of.
An increasing number of feral cats are being caught. Tāne says about 2 or 3 a week. How big are these cats?
Oh, they're like little bears. They're interesting, feral cats. Cats that have maybe a few generations. Cats that have like 2nd and 3rd generation in the bush. They do grow like different features. They've got a thicker fur. It seems like they have like shorter, stubbier, stronger legs. shorter, stubbier, stronger necks. They look like little bears. They look like little cubs. They look quite rough, but they look quite menacing. They don't look like your fluffy cat that you have at home, that's for sure. They still look kind of clumsy when they're in the bush, but if we give it another 5 years, maybe a decade, we might have a real issue when I think these cats are going to turn into real predators in the bush if we don't watch out.
And if you do find a cat in a trap, what do you do with it?
So most of the traps that we have for cats are traps that will kill the cat instantly. But if we are targeting specific areas where we know that there has been sign of cat either caught on camera or seen by farmers, we'll go in with a live cage capture and we'll capture that cat live, especially if it's in proximity to farms, just to be sure that it's not somebody's pet. And so we'll capture it live and we'll see if it has a chip or any electronic data embedded in the cat to tell us that it is somebody's pet. If it's somebody's pet, we'll obviously return it safely to the home of the owner. But if we are sure that it's nobody's pet, we'll dispose of that cat quickly. I'm always on the lookout for different things to eat.
You eat from the bush?
Yeah, well, as part of our learnings and being lucky to share the space with the experts of rongoa and of sort of native forest, we get exposed to different types of this vegetation that we can eat. This is a kawawa plant, so it's just a little plant that grows off of the trunks of other trees, and when it's transparent, so at the moment you can see that this is a non-transparent leaf. That's a real dark green leaf. I don't know, sort of the shape of a maple leaf in a funny way, elongated maple leaf. But when that leaf is transparent, it's quite a luscious little bite.
What does it taste like?
Tastes like walnut. I found a little transparent one here. Like a little salad green.
It's so
It's
like
got
a
a
walnut.
nutty flavour. It's only a little one, but
It's actually quite nice.
sometimes we come out here and spend time in the huts, especially if we're working deep in the forest. We have to be out here for a few nights, and when you're out here for a few nights, you're usually eating sort of dehydrated foods, foods that we have to reconstitute. But after a little while, you need that fresh bite, and so it's really cool to come into the forest and know exactly what is edible and have a fresh bite.
Fresh salad from the bush.
This horopito plant here, I'm not sure what the English name for it is, but we can call it pepper plant because this plant here is a hot pepper.
You're not going to fool me with that.
Yeah. But it is lovely. It's
It
a
numbs
spicy.
your lips sometimes, doesn't
It's a spicy nibble, but dried up. We've taken some and dried it up and put it on our steaks, and it is nice. That one was real spicy.
The mountain ranges are covering on average 14 kilometres a day and come across visitors from all over the world.
Hello.
Hey, good morning there.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
How far are you going today?
Trying to get to Sign Hut. Depends on the weather.
It's not a good day for the weather, so we will try our best.
Yeah.
I'm from the north of Spain. Also, mountains in there, so we'll see.
Your mountains are different from ours, I
They're
guess.
very different. The forest is wonderful, so we'll see what we can see there.
And the birds, are you listening?
Yeah. And the peace. We are out far away from the city. That's the most important part.
True, the peace. Well, you have a lovely day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. How long have you been doing this job?
So this is my 4th year working with the maunga. And
What,
it has been life-changing.
Life-changing?
Yeah, hard out. Yeah, the well-being that is provided from the mountain is unmeasurable. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know that since having the opportunity to spend sort of many days a week out here on the mountain, maybe reprioritise how I look at life. I'm not sure if even that's it. I can't describe it. But I know that my life is far better now than it ever has been, and I know that one of the major influences on that that well-being is being here, high levels of oxygen, good physical activity, and just no noise, no pollution, birds, tree life, drinking from the rivers.
What were you doing before?
Before I was working in the social arena, so a lot of work with high schools, a lot of work around youth development, particularly in and around the marae, and so just working to support young Māori males from the marae and helping the younger generations grow into whatever it is they want to grow into, and just giving them tools. And
You would still do that sort of work
absolutely,
on the maunga, wouldn't
absolutely,
you?
yeah. Taranaki Maunga project, it's all about connecting community to the maunga, and so we do that in many different ways, but one of the ways that we really enjoy doing that is by bringing schools in and working with youth groups and working with Te Ara Taiao, who coordinate our local schools into the natural environment. So we bring kids in and we just expose them to the space. We don't really do much talking. We let the forest talk for itself. We just take them on some beautiful walks. Sometimes we expose them to the science that we engage in, and they can be in whatever mood before we get into the bush. By the time we get out of the bush, they're laughing. You can see that their energy is high. They're all smiling. They absolutely love the mountain, and I haven't had an engagement with rangatahi on the mountain where they haven't come out feeling good.
And do they want to come back?
They love it. They want to come back. They want to be rangers. They want to be kaitaki. They want to be conservationists. They want to know more about professional pathways in terms of science and all things to do with volcanology and all things to do with native species and tree and river. They love it and they want it.
I suppose many of them would have lived with this maunga in their short lives
Yep.
and not really connected with it, or just had it there and taken it for granted.
Yeah. So, and much is the case right across the board, not just with our young ones, but even our kaumātua, even our elders, many of our community who have lived in Taranaki, and everybody sees the mountain in the morning when we wake up. You don't have to go far without seeing the mountain. But yeah, it's been interesting to find out that people have never really had the experience of coming far into the bush and seeing what the mountain has to offer on the inside.
Mountain Ranger Tāne Houston heading off up the track on Mount Taranaki. Just after Sally Round visited, 34 Kiwi were released into Te Papakura o Taranaki, the former Egmont National Park. She's been a shearer, a teacher and a social worker. More recently, Serena Leiders has found her calling as a traditional healer, working with shearers all around the motu. Janina Schwanneker spoke to Serena about how her rural upbringing helped prepare her for a lifetime of service and giving back to her community.
Kia ora, ko whitu matarau te maunga, wai atu tawa, harau te tawaka, ngā te prau te iwi, ko Serena Leiders tōku ingoa. So my family, my mother's family hails from the East Cape of the North Island. I live in the Catlins. I live in Tokanui, married to a sheep and beef farmer.
Now, you yourself had a very rural upbringing. Can you tell me what it was like growing up in a sixth-generation shearing gang?
My family obviously spent a lot of time in shearing for generations in both sides of my family. So I grew up in Western Southland, a little place called Ojai, which was a booming coal mining town, booming shearing town, and also home of Mount Linton Station. So everything we needed was right in our little town, the centre of the world. You know, everything wasn't centralised in the cities then, so, you know, we had everything in our little rural town. So I guess that really set me up for a lot of the stuff that I do now, and that, you know, you just, if you want something done, you just get on and do it. I guess that's just part of rural life, and really has made a huge difference when I think about it and the way that I do things as an adult, growing up in that little country town and surrounded by amazing people from all walks of life. People would come in droves over the summertime. You know, you're only sure once a year then, and so the town would boom to astronomical numbers over the summertime and over the main shear, and they would come from all over the country. It really did set me up for the rest of my life.
From that small country upbringing, you've gone on to have quite a varied and interesting career.
It's one way to describe it, I guess. Some would say chaotic mess, but, you know, I guess it's still hanging on to that rural sector and a lot of the things that I do. A rural woman, part of a rural woman and working in the shearing industry in the way that I do, and the capacity that I do, I guess living rurally as well. I shore for a little while when my boys were little, but worked in the shearing industry up until I was 27, and I went away to university, trained to be a primary bilingual school teacher, and then went into social work after that. So I have my own company now, and am self-employed and run a consultancy company, and as well as a wellbeing centre. So social sector, as much as I've tried to run away from it, keeps hauling me back in all sorts of capacities. I suppose it is varied when you look at it like that.
What was it that led you to start whānau consultancy services?
I'd been working for the commissioning agency for whānau ora Te Pūtahitanga, and you know, when you're working at those higher levels of decision making, and you're working across. I was working across the whole South Island and doing a whole lot of stuff there. I kind of got to a point where I was like, actually, I want to make the decisions. I want to have the influence in the way that I practice, and the places and spaces that I can go into comfortably. And so I wanted to be able to practice as myself and not of the values of somebody else or another organisation, or in my eyes it wasn't giving to the people that were important to me, which was the shearing industry.
You definitely seem someone who's comfortable wearing many hats, often all at once. What's your next big project or challenge?
So I am on the board of Share for a Cause, and so we met with Joseph Mooney and the MP the other day around how do we connect the services in the rural sector, how do we connect them together so that they're appropriate for the shearing industry that is more than 80% Māori, or I think it's more than 90% now, but a high percentage of Māori. The services are all there. We don't need to recreate the wheel, but how do we make them industry specific and culturally appropriate? I also do traditional healing and massage therapy and all of that sort of stuff. So I travel around some of the shearing shows and normalising looking after their body physically, spiritually, emotionally, on the ground in the industry. You know, I've spent my whole life, 48 years, of watching people hammer their bodies and push them to the extreme and not actually take care of them in a culture of harden up, work harder, you know, do everything harder, you know, and watch lots of people I care about have buckled knees, have, you know, come out the other end of the industry quite physically hurt. So trying to normalise that, as well as traditionally accessing rongoa Māori and wherever they are. So they might come and see me once at the Golden Shears, but then they're going to go home and they're going to find the people in their whānau collective who does traditional healing or who does some of that spiritual stuff. You know, we've got a whole generation, a whole industry impacted by colonisation and the intergenerational trauma that's associated to that. And so how do we address that? Because the side effects are detrimental for our communities, for our families, you know, the drinking, the drugs, all of the darker side of our society. They're all just flow-on effects of something much deeper. So, and I guess in being a social worker for feels like eons, I realised that actually our people need healing, because I can run around and put sticking plasters on all of these gaping wounds, or I can actually try and grow this space of getting some soul healing, and what the impact of that is massive and has a ripple effect out through their families.
That was Serena Leiders of Whānau Consultancy Services talking to Janina Schwannecker. Now we're heading south to find out about a designer clothing label that's based on a hill country farm in Otago. To find out more, Cosmo Kentish Barnes is with Willie Lawson on his farm at Merton, just north of Dunedin.
Now Willie, where are we heading to?
We're heading northwest into a block that we call the River Paddock 2. It's a pretty high block of ours. It's covered with a lot of tussock, which is predominantly like all our blocks out here. And yeah, it's got most of our main flock of mixed age ewes in it.
Beautiful views from up here.
Yeah, it's nice on a good day. As you can imagine, with being close to the sea, yeah, we can get a fair bit of that easterly sort of claggy wet weather, but also, as you can see, we probably haven't had it for a long time just because we're very dry and we've missed out on a lot of that easterly flow due to the El Nino pattern over the last sort of 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, has that made sheep and beef farming quite challenging?
Definitely, yep. I mean, historically that's our main challenge really, but this year, which has been pretty well documented, we're facing lots of challenges really, with obviously lower red meat prices, higher interest rates and higher costs. So
low wool prices?
Low wool, yeah. Unfortunately we've become used to that, but there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel for that. But yeah, it's just going to be a bit of a slow shift, I think, to try and get back to wool being somewhere where it was or close to a few years ago.
Willie, we are on top of a hill at one of the highest points on your farm, and we're looking at some amazing scenery. How would you describe it?
It's high, hard hill country, I suppose I'd call it. But yet with being so close to the coast, a lot of people probably don't quite know what's in behind the hills here until they get out here. So out to our sort of southwest is a big property called Lamb Hill, right on the horizon, and that's back towards Middlemarch. We sort of go across the river there, which is the south branch of the Waikawaiti River, and we sort of go back another hill range there before we go into our neighbouring property, Four Rivers.
And so how much land have you got in total here?
There's about 1,350 hectares, probably about 1,150 of that is effective. You can see some bushy blocks out there. 3 of those are in Kiwi 2 covenants, but more's in the pipeline to do as well.
And we can see the river way down there in the gully.
Yep. And its flow at the moment is probably a little bit lower than it usually is, just due to the lack of rain within the area.
Yes. There's a mob of ewes on the top here, and we can see more sheep scattered down the hills towards the river.
Yep. And this block, they're all in this block. Well, most of them hopefully. There's the odd one that pokes out. But this block's about 100 hectares in size, so it's a reasonably big block and lots of different places for the sheep to be grazing and shelter and in the sunshine.
Tell me about the sheep. What breeds do well on this land?
Yeah, so these are Romdales. These are as in Romney-Perrindale crosses. They're just a good, hardy, resilient sheep. Great survivability. They move well, and they're just good, hard sheep, which really need in this sort of country.
Because of the low wool prices, do you focus mainly on meat?
We do. But I mean, we haven't changed our system because of that over the years. We're still basically using the same practices and farming the same way, but just because of that shift to meat, in terms of profitability, that is our main source of income now, and wool is really just a hope to cover your costs in terms of shearing. But I mean, you're shearing every year anyway, so that wool's going to be there, and we do it from an animal health point of view as well. So we sort of recently changed back. We used to shear the ewes twice a year, but due to the costs of shearing, that's gone up extensively in recent years, and the low return on wool, we've just gone back to once a year shearing, which hasn't been the end of the world either, because the wool is longer when it goes to sell, so that there is potentially more demand out there as long as you can sort of try and maintain the quality of it.
And your wife, Georgina, has started a fashion brand that is adding value to this wool.
Yeah, 100%. Yep, no, it is. It's not the ewe wool that we use for her fashion brand. She uses our hogget wool, but the hope is that by using that hogget wool, it'll just continue to sort of hopefully snowball in terms of the uses for wool that we and other people out there can try to find to use, and just get it going back in the right way it needs to be going. I mean, it's such a great product, and it's a byproduct of our farming system, which is just completely underutilised. And, my dad, he put a lot of work into genetics and whatnot to try and create really good wool off here. So, you know, to keep that going in some form is really cool.
And Willie, what's the annual wool clip that you get from the farm?
Yeah, it's around sort of 12,000 kilos, probably all classes of stock included. It's probably more like 9,000 from the ewes, and then the hoggets and the ewe lambs sort of make up the rest of it.
And how much is put aside for Georgina's clothing?
At the moment, it's just about, it's probably about 70% of the hogget wool, but the aim will be that it'll be all of that hogget wool, so that'll be around 1,500 to 2,000 kilos. It's a small percentage at the moment, but with the demand of wool globally at the moment not being as high and the prices not being that high, it's a far better way to try and utilise it, really. And it obviously fits with what George is doing, her ethos and whatnot, and the production of her coats, you know, like just the whole slow fashion sort of movement. I think it's a great thing. We could all do with buying less of the things which are cheaper and made offshore and less sustainable materials.
I will be catching up with Georgina soon to find out more about the woolen clothing she's making. But Willie, tell me about the history of this land. When did your family first start farming here?
My grandfather bought the place in 1950. They moved from up in the Matakanui Valley, and my father took over when my grandfather passed away. Dad would have been reasonably young, so he took it over when he was about 24, and then we farmed it as one, as our family with my older brother and my dad, and about 7 years ago we split it up between my brother and I, and yeah, just good, progressive and unselfish family members really to be able to make it happen, so we're very lucky.
Quite nice to have your brother as a neighbour.
Yeah, no, very, very, very good. Yep, we still help each other out with certain aspects of farming, some big jobs, whether it's big days in the yards or whatnot, and we're still able to have a few beers and a barbecue at the end of the day, so that's the main thing.
Now, where are your cattle?
They're all out in the back country at the moment as we look sort of southwest to those high bushy blocks. They sort of go and winter out there, and they're a pretty key component for our farming system just in terms of managing pasture quality. I mean, as you can see out here, when it does grow, it can grow pretty quickly, so you end up with a lot of brown top and tag, so the cows are great for getting that down so that it's really good for the sheep to come in behind them. So they're doing the hard work out on the back hills at the moment for the winter, and then come springtime we'll spread them out amongst all the blocks to calve in.
Looking back towards the ocean, what is the bay that we can see?
So that's the Waikouaiti beach there, which goes to Mount Taranaki, which is the peninsula coming out there. So it's Waikouaiti, and that bay joins up to another beach town called Tāne. And as you can see, sort of in the foreground before those towns is really good productive farmland between us and there. So good variety of landscape and farming.
We can see the ocean spray lifting off the sea.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, there was a wee bit of talk that we might have been getting a bit of fog or drizzle overnight, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And often that fog and drizzle can get a wee bit depressing up in here, but at the moment we'd fully take it just anyway to get a bit of moisture into the ground, even though it is winter and we're not going to get a whole lot of growth out of it. But at the same time, it's a pretty magical view on a day like today.
We have come back down to the farmyard and am with Georgina outside the shearing shed. Georgina, tell me about your background.
I grew up rurally, but not off a farm, up in Wanaka, and I trained as a radiographer first, so I worked overseas as a radiographer, and then when I came back from London I did some postgrad study and became a sonographer.
Are you still doing that?
I am, yes.
Do you love the farming way of life?
Yeah, it's great. Well, we have 3 boys, so there's plenty for them to keep occupied doing, so it's perfect, really.
How old are your boys?
7, 5 and 10 months.
And on top of farming and family and doing that clinical work, you are also a fashion designer. Tell me about that.
I still can't believe that when people say it, that I'm a fashion designer. It was sort of a childhood dream that I never thought would actually come true. So I really enjoy that part of it. It's kind of, I say it's a hobby, really, but I love it.
But you have your own brand, and all the clothing that you make comes from your sheep on this farm.
Yes, it does. Yep. It's great.
What is your brand called?
Atia. So that's my grandmother's name backwards. Her name was Rita, and she was a dressmaker. So she made wedding dresses mainly. That was her job, and she was pretty clever, very clever actually. And I spent lots of time in her sewing room as a child, fiddling around with her, and she tried to teach me a thing or two. And
So that's where your inspiration comes from.
part of it, yeah, definitely. But with the declining wool prices, and I was grumbling and groaning at my husband about it, and he said, well, why don't you try and do something with it? And I thought, okay, challenge accepted. And that's how I started investigating and researching and finding out what I could actually do with this great fibre that we grow right here on the farm.
And you started thinking about coats.
Coats, yes.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, strong wool's been used in carpet forever, and I thought, well, why can't we use that in the fashion industry and make a great piece that is going to last forever, because it's such a durable product and there's so many benefits to wool. So I looked into options of things that we could do, and I love coats, and in London when we were living there I sort of got a bit of an obsession with coats, so I thought I'm going to start making my own.
What was the first step you took?
I had to start looking into if it was possible to use our wool here in New Zealand and where I could actually get it processed and how to process it, because not being from a farming background, I sort of didn't know that much about wool, and I didn't know what scouring was and the processes it needed to go through to become fabric. So yeah, once I'd done all the research, I thought, well, I really have to do something with this now, and here we are.
Now, I've just taken a picture of Georgina wearing one of her coats, and I'll put that onto the Country Life webpage in case people want to see it. Now, tell me about the quality of the wool. Do you hand select it?
So our wool that we use for these coats comes off our hogget sheep. So hoggets are older than lamb, but haven't had a lamb yet, so they're not quite used. And they produce a longer length wool. It's slightly finer than new wool, so it gives a softer feel. We don't hand select the fleeces yet, but we might this year. But we've done lots of testing on the hogget clip and made sure it's all up to scratch for using for our product, and it's come out really well actually. It's perfect.
Yes. What sort of micron is that wool?
So it's 31. So it's not as fine as a lamb's wool, but it needs to be a bit higher microns for the strength, for the weaving of the fabric.
And what have been some of the biggest obstacles you've faced along this journey?
The biggest obstacle was finding each factory or place that would be able to process the wool here within New Zealand. When I started researching, it wasn't widely advertised, these mills and scours, and I remember in Dunedin here there was wool mills up in Roslyn and in Mosgiel, and I couldn't believe that there's just nothing left of them, and I was trying to find where these places were and they just don't exist anymore.
Is that because most of our wool goes to China now?
Yes, it all gets exported. I mean, we're a country full of sheep, so why do we not process wool here? It blows my mind.
Well, shall we head up to your studio and have a look at some of your coats and blazers?
Sure.
We have come into your studio, Georgina, and this is where all the magic happens.
Sure is, yeah.
There's a row of beautiful looking woolen coats along the wall here. Can you describe what they're like for our listeners, please?
Wow, they are soft and cosy and warm and inviting, really.
What's your designer style? What inspires you?
I like classic designs that are going to last a lifetime, really. You don't want them to go out of fashion or out of style. You want to be able to wear them with anything, and this is the original.
Do you want to pull that off so we can have a look? Now, what colour is this?
This is wheat, quite a natural colour. So it's a double-breasted coat with a lapel collar. We sort of go for a slightly oversized look, so it's a relaxed fit. We've got patch pockets, and so nice and handy for phones and keys, and it's a good length too. It covers us down to about mid-calf.
Yes, quite a simple design.
Very simple and classic, really.
And there's a seam down the middle of the back.
So that is a double flat valved seam, and I wanted my coats to be unlined so that you could really get the benefits of the wool without a lining in there. And so we really did work hard to get these nice clean finishes and the seams as a feature.
And it's amazing that all these coats are made from the wool that comes from this farm.
I know. That was one of the most exciting moments, was seeing the first coat come out of the package, and we saw that wool go from a sheep to a fashion item, which was quite incredible, really.
Now, you've got some of your scoured wool here.
Well, this is our hogget clip, and we love that we can get everything done here in New Zealand, but it just feels soft and it smells delicious too.
It does, doesn't it? So what happens to this scoured wool? What are the steps that you need to take to be able to make these woolen coats?
So we take our bales fresh from the sheep up to Timaru, and they get scoured, which is cleaned essentially. It takes all the grease out of the wool, and then this wool gets sent directly up to Wellington, which they then card and spin it into the yarn, and the yarn will then get sent directly from Wellington to Auckland, and we get it woven into fabric at the mill in Auckland, and then from Auckland they send it to our cutters, and the cutters cut the pattern, and then to our manufacturers in Auckland also, who sew it into the end garment. And I didn't want to do it if I couldn't keep it all done within New Zealand. It didn't make sense to have this great product here in New Zealand and then send it overseas and then bring it back and sell it as New Zealand wool. It had to be all made here within the country.
I guess there's lots of costs involved in this process.
Just with each step of the way, the costs can get quite high. I mean, processing the wool into the fabric is the biggest cost of making these coats here in New Zealand, but...
Especially for small runs.
Well, no, the small runs works well because we can sort of do as many as we want when we want, and our manufacturers are really good. We just have a good relationship with them.
You can get them to make your coats on demand.
Yes, when we need them,
Yeah, what a great situation to be in.
Yeah, it's great. And we are going to do more designs and patterns, so we'll release a new style next year, which I've just started working on.
What's that going to be like?
I think we'll go back to another a length coat.
Because you've got some shorter ones here too, haven't you?
Yeah, these are the blazers, which have been really popular for spring and sort of autumn in-between season styles. It's sort of a dress jacket that you can wear out for dinner or just over jeans or whatever.
Very stylish.
That's about all I've got left there too. They've been selling really well.
Where can people buy your coats?
So we're online, and we have some in Hype in store in Dunedin and gifted in Wanaka.
So people can contact you to find out more?
Yeah.
Do you think there's an increasing amount of interest in clothing that has a sustainable story like your coats and blazers?
I definitely do think there has been a change, or there is a change happening. Even from when I started, people didn't really understand slow fashion or sustainability, but there's a lot more out there now and people are talking about it, and hopefully we start to see a bit more of a change.
Georgina Lawson there in her design studio. Cosmo was also chatting to her hubby Willie on their hill country farm in Otago. For a link to Georgina's Atea Woolen Coats website, and to see the photos from today's stories and heaps more goodies, go to rnz.co.nz/country life. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again next week with another summer edition for your listening pleasure. Just a reminder, you can follow and listen to Country Life on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or any podcast app so you don't miss an episode. Bye for now.